What's going on, guys? It's Radiant, back with part 2 of my Gray vs. Esdeath debunk. Now, if you haven't checked out part 1 yet, I recommend you doing so because I bring up stuff about speed and cold resistance in this video. Though, you can also watch it after for just clarification on things, whichever you prefer. So sit back and get comfortable because, as you can see, part 2 is a bit longer. Now, before getting into the actual topics of part 2, there's another ridiculous claim about Gray and Fairy Tail speed that I forgot to mention in part 1 that I want to correct. That claim being, Fairy Tail's not that fast. Agnologia, the strongest character, was outsped by a ship. Alright, for those who make this claim have no understanding of speed and its different forms in action series. This moment of Agnologia supposedly being outsped by a ship would be categorized as travel speed. In this case, it's his flight speed. Low travel speed doesn't mean your overall speed is slow. You can also have fast combat and reaction speed, but slower travel speed. Superman is a perfect example of showcasing the different forms of speed. Here it's stated that Superman has unparalleled flight speed, and it's up there with the Flash, though when he's boots on ground he can't quite keep up, which has been shown before. This would be running speed. Now, although Supes can't keep up with the Flash while running, even while flying in recent iterations, doesn't mean he can't combat and react to the Flash. Superman has shown that he has fast combat and reaction speed, being able to combat and react and flick the Flash who is trying to speed blitz him. So with speed, it can in fact be in many different forms. Agnologia supposedly being outsped while flying doesn't mean his and Fairy Tail's combat and reaction speed is slow. Now, have you noticed how I've said supposedly outsped? In truth, Agnologia wasn't even being serious when going after the ship. This is confirmed when, after being distracted by the light from the Neo Eclipse, he got serious and immediately caught the ship, so he wasn't even going full on after the ship. Also, the ship actually has a speed feat to support it. Back during Tartarus, it could move and evade a speeding Grandina. Her, along with the other dragons, are capable of flying across the continent in just a minute. This feat becomes even more impressive when you realize how big Fury is, which I have and will explain later in the video. To further add on just how crazy fast these dragons are, they weren't even at their true full power when they were destroying all the faces due to the fact that they weren't even alive. So all in all, Fairy Tail and Agnologia are fast, and the ship doesn't invalidate their speed at all. Moving on to attack power, this is where I felt Death Battle really messed up in concerns to Esdeath. They overestimated and misinterpreted her power and scaling. Starting with the Snowstorm, they made the assumption that Esdeath's daily power and strength scales to the power they calced for the Snowstorm. This is more of a stretch than scaling Gray to Urza's meteor feat, which it isn't in fact, but I'll get into that later. It took her days of prep, not a few, to store up enough power to pull off that storm. You can't scale daily strength and power to power acquired through extensive prep. Though they did take into account her prep time and simply divided the energy of the storm, getting 93 petatons, then applied that to her strength, which is even more of a stretch. As I clarified, it actually took her days of prep, meaning it was more than just a few. None of Esdeath's daily attacks are on that level of power, or even on the level of the divided energy that they got. She hasn't fought anyone close to that level, nor does she have any other big move of that level. Esdeath, back during her early days with the army, froze an entire lake. Death Battle claimed she did this with zero effort, yet they completely leave out the fact that right after that, Esdeath states that she wouldn't be able to use her power for a while afterward. So it did take her quite a bit of effort if it drained her power. Yes, this was early days Esdeath, but it still stands to reason that she suffers a drain from doing anything too large scale. She even states that her Freeze Stop ability, her best move, drains a lot of her power. That's why she can only use it once per day. All Death Battle did was calc the amount of energy Esdeath has at her disposal to create ice. Though just because she has that amount of energy at her disposal doesn't mean each of her attacks or physical attacks are of that level. Say if I have an ultimate move and it's to create a hurricane, which at average level yields 1.3 to the 17 joules. Does this mean all of my attacks and physical attacks yield that same amount of energy? No, especially if I have to prep in order to do it. You can think Esdeath's Tegu like a battery. She holds 93 petatons of energy that she has access to create ice. Though if she was to do something that requires 93 petatons of energy, likely like Death Battle implies, she would end up draining all of her energy supply, resulting in her not being able to use her powers like she did when she froze the lake and her freeze stop, which is why she's a comparable fighter even without her powers. Lastly, the snowstorm is not an offensive destruction-based attack, for those who think that it is. People in Death Battle need to stop thinking that just because something has a big kinetic energy yield, that it instantly means that it is offensive. Weather changing, creation, and big range does not equal destructive capacity and attack power. Not all attacks are going to be meant to do damage and large-scale destruction. Some moves like Esdeath's Snowstorm are only weather changing. The Snowstorm only serves to give Esdeath an amp in power and give her an edge in battle when she's alone, but it does nothing immediate to anyone else. Esdeath states that if you're strong enough, you can withstand the snowstorm, so the storm wouldn't matter to someone like Gray. There are so many wrong assumptions on Esdeath's side just to make her look better in comparison. Her daily strength and power does not scale to the snowstorm even when divided. The next scaling problem with Esdeath is when they said that she is above the robot's first and second form in both strength and power, which she isn't. This reasoning comes from a statement from the agenda saying that Esdeath is beyond what the robot can do. When she says this, she is strictly talking about range, not being overall superior. As you can see, she clearly says that the robot can affect the capital, but Esdeath can go beyond and affect the country. Someone being stated to be a greater threat doesn't automatically mean that they're overall more powerful. It can simply mean that they possess an ability or object that makes them a greater threat. Look at the Flash and Superman, for example. Let's say Superman is destroying an entire city, but Flash is seen as a bigger issue because he's using his super speed to attack the whole country. Does this mean Flash is all around more powerful than Supes? No. It's just because Flash's speed allows him to get things done at a quicker rate, which makes him a bigger threat. This is the case with Esdeath and the robot. She is only superior to the robot in terms of range when she activates the snowstorm. That's not all. Back when Night Raid went to rescue Tatsumi, Mind got into a fight with Esdeath. For those who don't know, Mind's weapon Pumpkin gets stronger the more danger she's in. She fought both top tiers Esdeath and Budo head on, which increased her firepower to unseen levels. The firepower was so great that Esdeath saw it as a serious threat to her and prioritized dodging rather than blocking or taking a hit. If she saw Mind's firepower as a threat, then the robot's large-scale firepower, which is superior to Mind's, would undoubtedly be a threat to her as well. She even states that the robot's firepower is great and would opt to point out blind spots, so she is not superior to the robot's large-scale firepower. Now, when it comes to strength, it's clear that the robot is superior there as well. A little bit before the robot appeared, base Esdeath, meaning without the snowstorm, fought Tatsumi for a bit and even crushed him under her ice, but Tatsumi didn't take any significant damage. Whereas the robot, it actually did more damage to Tatsumi than she was able to. With just one hit, it crushed Tatsumi and the damage was instantly critical, unlike with Esdeath. Tatsumi was pretty much about to die if it wasn't for him adapting and gaining regeneration. So Esdeath is not overall superior to the robot, but she doesn't have to be in order to beat it. I'll get into that after my last issue with her scaling, which is her being scaled to Tatsumi supposedly overpowering a laser and being overall above him in strength and power. The whole Tatsumi overpowering a laser thing, I can see how people would think that he did. The truth is it's not very noticeable unless you stop and really pay attention. Even I thought he did it first. Though after going back and looking over things for this video, I came to realize that Tatsumi did not in fact overpower one of the large-scale lasers. The location of the weak point he and Wave created being the first piece of evidence that suggests that he did not. Tatsumi stated that the weak point is his main focus, and as you can see, the weak point is on the robot's midsection away from any of the lasers, and no other form of weaponry is near it. So Tatsumi would just have to fly directly towards the weak spot, and he'd be safe, which he does when he starts his charge. Furthermore, the cannons themselves is also evidence that says he didn't. As I said before, the weak point is away from the cannons, though the closest ones are the chest and right and left leg. The shoulders are obviously out of the question because he wasn't flying that high. Why would he? So that being the case, Tatsumi would only have to worry about dodging two lasers, the chest cannon or the left and right leg cannons. And guess how many lasers we see Tatsumi get past? Yep, exactly 2. For those who are still adamant that he did, I went and typed up the maneuvers Tatsumi would have to do if he was flying directly at one of the lasers. See, these are just ridiculous to believe that he did, especially when his main focus was the weak point and the weak point, it would literally be the safest route. So he would just have to fly straight towards that. To really drive it home, all the lasers were fired at the same time, and they only moved straight. Meaning, if one of the lasers passed Tatsumi, they all did. And guess how many passed him? 2. So what we're actually seeing in the bottom panel is Tatsumi making impact with the weak point, and the next part showing the damage. Oh, and the only area that was affected was the robot's midsection, none of the lasers. So Tatsumi didn't overpower the laser, so he wouldn't scale to the robot's large-scale firepower, meaning neither would Esdeath. Now, on to the issue of scaling her above Tatsumi in Stage 3 and his dragon form. Esdeath, in fact, would only scale equal to Stage 2 Tatsumi, due to the fact that we have seen how it would be if Esdeath was far above Tatsumi in prowess, having easily kept up with Stage 1 Tatsumi and Trump Card Susanoo at the same time, then proceeded to one-shot Tatsumi with her ice. The same case happened with Stage 1 Tatsumi when he faced Budo, someone as strong as Esdeath. Then, when Tatsumi evolves to Stage 2, he was able to fight equally with and land hits on both Esdeath and Budo. Even when Esdeath was going all out without the amp from the snowstorm, she couldn't take him down as easily as she was able to before when he was in Stage 1. As I showed, she could one-shot Tatsumi with her ice when he was in Stage 1, but she couldn't to Stage 2 after crushing him under her ice. Though she was giving him a hard time, Tatsumi was able to push forward and close that small gap in strength between them. This is thanks to his ability to adapt and grow stronger as a fight continues on, and more so when he evolves. So it's wrong to scale Esdeath above Tatsumi's stronger evolutions when she's shown equal to a weaker state. Like, say if I was fighting Goku, and going all out I could fight equally with Super Saiyan 1. Does that mean I could easily face Super Saiyan 2 and Super Saiyan 3? No. If I couldn't take down Super Saiyan 1 despite going all out, then I'm going to have a really hard time going against Super Saiyan 2 and get outright beat by Super Saiyan 3. People like saying Stage 3 Tatsumi was scared to fight Esdeath, but that wasn't the case. What Tatsumi was scared of was the prospect of having to fight her and the robot at the same time. He even says, "Could you wait till I'm done fighting the robot?" Meaning even after being potentially worn out from fighting the robot, he'd still fight her. No, in fact, he would have been stronger after fighting the robot, in fact, due to evolving. Either way, that doesn't seem like something a person who's scared to fight would say. Then there's the fact that if Stage 2 Tatsumi wasn't scared to confront Esdeath, why would a stronger version of him be scared? Then there's the whole Esdeath one-shotted Dragon Tatsumi. Well, for one, she was amped by the snowstorm when she slashed Dragon Tatsumi, so this feat doesn't apply to Esdeath's strength on a daily basis. Then there's the fact that Esdeath didn't fight, match in physical prowess, beat, and kill Dragon Tatsumi. She only landed a hit on him. He was back up right after she hit him thanks to his regeneration, so the hit didn't really do anything to him. Just because you managed to land a hit on someone doesn't mean you are overall above the person you hit in speed and strength. With that logic, I could say Stage 2 Tatsumi was above Esdeath and Budo because he managed to land solid hits on them. Also, Tatsumi wasn't thinking straight due to the fact that Tyrant was trying to take over his mind and consciousness. So with that all being said, Esdeath in base does not scale above Tatsumi in Stage 3 or his dragon form. Okay, so Esdeath doesn't scale above Stage 3 Tatsumi and dragon form Tatsumi, and her strength and power doesn't scale to her snowstorm, the robot's strength, and the robot's firepower due to Tatsumi not having overpowered a laser. Yet, even though she isn't above the robot or those other things, she doesn't need to be, as I've said before. I in fact think she can beat the robot, but not because she's overall stronger. The series has shown us that she can beat the robot, but without having to be overall stronger than it. To show how, I did a mini versus within my versus battle, that's pretty meta, between her and the robot. The robot in its first form has shown good firepower, but nothing much in terms of durability, aside from withstanding hits from evolved Tatsumi, which is kind of an issue seeing as regular Esdeath scales to Stage 2 Tatsumi, so the durability of the robot would pretty much be the only issue, but she said that she is aware of blind spots on the robot. Now, I think Esdeath could handle the robot much better than Tatsumi because her ice gives her a lot more to work with and greater versatility. Tatsumi was stuck having to get in close but Esdeath can be both close and long range thanks to her ice. Plus, she has flight advantage like Tatsumi and Wave, so her space of dodging is extended. The robot's small-scale missiles would be no issue for her, since they have been blocked by people inferior to her. Even Wave, using his feathers, has intercepted the missiles, as well as used them to stop the robot from firing its large-scale cannon. Esdeath could easily replicate what Wave and the others did, seeing as she can spam large-scale icicles and ice shields, plus she can hit it with large chunks of ice. She also has the option of freezing the robot's firing mechanisms, so stopping the robot's firepower wouldn't be a problem for her. Now let's say she had time to prep to fight the robot, allowing her to access the snowstorm. Then it's pretty much an easy fight for her. With the snowstorm activated, she was able to cut Dragon Tatsumi. When Tatsumi evolves, the armor increases in durability, as we saw when he could take hits from Esdeath and Budo after evolving. So Dragon Tatsumi should be able to withstand the robot's second form blade attack and punches that Stage 2 couldn't thanks to adapting. Since she could hit a stronger version of Tatsumi, this would put her strength with the snowstorm above the physical attacks of the robot's second form. The snowstorm also strengthens her ice to where it can withstand attacks from Dragon Tatsumi and lets her encase giant structures in ice like these monsters which were bigger than buildings. So the robot is pretty much screwed if she has access to her snowstorm, especially if she used it while it's in its first form. All in all, Esdeath is more than capable of beating the robot without having to be overall stronger than it. There's one last thing I want to address about Esdeath before moving on to Gray's attack power. It's her time freeze ability. I'm not going to explain the truth of the ability since I already did that in part 1. What I'm addressing this time is how most people who bring up this ability seem to ignore the important question of, can Esdeath damage the person she's fighting? This is important because it determines if her time stop ability is useless or not. Most people just say, Esdeath can freeze time so she wins, while not checking if her opponent is too durable for her. They think once she uses it, she'll just be able to harm her opponent somehow, which is not true. If Esdeath is facing someone that's far too durable for her attacks, freezing time won't change the fact that she can't harm them. She'll just be there unable to do anything until her ability deactivates. Esdeath isn't stupid. She's smart enough to realize she can't harm her opponent, and activating her time freeze won't change that fact. If anything, Esdeath would use the ability to allow herself to escape and avoid defeat or getting killed. Now, on to Gray's power. As I've already made clear, Death Battle's analysis of Gray was just poor. It's clear they either skimmed and half did their research or blatantly downplayed Gray for the sake of making the fight fair and entertaining. It's both, to be honest. I mean, they only scaled Gray to 3 feats: Natsu dodging lightning, the meteor, and Invel's storm, leaving out a bunch of other things that apply to Gray. The first clear mistake Death Battle did in regards to Gray shows right when the fight starts, when they had his ice clones move. Gray specializes in inanimate objects, while Leone is the one who specializes in making his ice move. This is established towards the very beginning of the series and is commonly known in Fairy Tail. So either they didn't do their research or they just let him do it for the sake of it, which shows just how loose and uncaring they are about getting the accuracy correct for characters and their abilities. Though it doesn't really matter one way or the other, Gray still has much more going for him. They then go on and do a calc for Invel's storm. They made the assumption that Invel's snowstorm covered all of Furei, which is wrong. With Esdeath's snowstorm, we see its full range, but with Invel's, we don't. So you can't make the assumption on its range. Though even not knowing it, his storm is still pretty big. It's covering the entire battlefield where the war is taking place, which is huge. The big spike-like mountain structure in the back has the Fairy Tail Guild Hall on top of it, and it looks tiny in perspective. Then there's the fact that Invel's storm was created casually in an instant, whereas Esdeath had to take days to gather enough power to create hers. It's completely wrong to put a feat that was done through prep above a similar feat that was done right there in the moment. Like if I destroy a mountain in one punch and my friend has to take a week to build up enough power to do it, does that mean he's on par or above me in strength every day? No. So this means Invel's snowstorm is far above anything Esdeath is capable of on a daily basis. They also mention in a note that Gray can't scale to the Phoenix because it takes time for the Phoenix to wipe out everything on the planet. That's funny that they say that because they go and scale Esdeath to the snowstorm, which took her time to do. Are you seeing the double standards here? Not only that, like with many things in this fight, they were wrong with their assessment on the Phoenix. If you actually watched Fairy Tail's first movie, it in fact took no time at all for the Phoenix to gather the necessary energy to wipe out everything on the planet. What was gonna take time was the spread, its range. The destructive power to do it was accumulated in the moment, instantly. This is completely opposite of Esdeath, where she had to take days of storing up energy to pull off her snowstorm, but her range was immediate. And again, unlike the Phoenix, her storm is not destruction based. So Gray in fact wouldn't scale to the Phoenix's range, but he could scale to the attack potency. But I don't think that's likely the case because the Phoenix was gonna kill everyone. So to say he scales to that would pretty much say that Gray could one-shot anybody in Fairy Tail, which is obviously incorrect. But that's fine. He doesn't necessarily need to scale to the Phoenix in order to beat Esdeath, as I'm going to prove in this video. Now with all the misinformation cleared up, I can start delving into Gray's power and abilities. For starters, Gray has shown that he is capable of encasing people in ice when his attacks hit. He could do this sometimes before he got Devil Slayer. It just became more consistent when he actually got it, especially with his Zeroth longsword. You see, when it comes to elemental slayers like Gray and Natsu, their temperature is applied to their attacks when they're serious. Since we now know how cold Gray is, this means he's hitting his opponents with temperatures far beyond absolute zero. So that moment where Gray hit Esdeath with his Zeroth longsword, her arm not only would have come off, but she would have been instantly encased in ice. Like if any of his attacks hit, like his Ice Demon's Wrath, which they conveniently did not have him use, she would have been instantly flash frozen since she has no resistance to Gray's insane level of cold. They then go and claim that Esdeath is comparable to Tatsumi, who can outmuscle the robot, which I've already proven that she isn't. Like, I find it funny how they make it out to seem like Gray doesn't have the strength to outmuscle some giant monsters. Well, he can. Jumping back to Tartarus towards the middle of the arc, it was revealed that the Tartarus cube can grow in size and become a giant monster named Plutogrim. It's gigantic, reaching high in the sky above basic clouds, meaning it's 3 kilometers or a bit more. It's definitely much bigger than the robot. It has a castle on top of it which looks small compared to the base cube state. The tentacles are the span of canyons, so again, it's ginormous. Though some are going to say, duh, the Plutogrim is small, like building size, because it flew through one. For those who say that, you're a lost cause, and by no means whatsoever is the cube the size of a building. If that was the case, that would mean the castle on top of it would be smaller than a car, and everyone inside of the castle would be the size of freaking ants. If you use this argument, you need to learn a thing or two about distance and perspective. Things that are far away will look smaller from your perspective, but it's actually not. The sun appears smaller than your hand, but does that mean that it is? No. The monster is far away, which makes it look like it's the size of a building. Its roar traveled from where it was and destroyed the building. The fact that it appears that big despite being really far away shows how gigantic it is. Anyway, with that cleared up, the giant monster was later taken out by slashes from the Celestial Spirit King, who was summoned by Lucy. The king then went on to fight Mardgeir, who can casually with one hand fight off and withstand slashes from the king. Now, you're probably wondering what this has to do with Gray. Well, he is capable of fighting off and withstanding hits from a much stronger and serious Mardgeir in his Aetherius form. This means Gray's strength and power scales way above the Spirit King's feat of busting the cube. Then Gray scales to Natsu. Natsu in base casually created a no-named roar which one-shotted Blue Note Stinger. You know, the same guy who's capable of fighting Gildarts during Tenro. Then, during Avatar, his Iron Fist could destroy a mountainous hill. I say mountainous hill because it wasn't a mountain, but it wasn't a small hill either. Also during Avatar, a giant being, a war god, that's also bigger than the robot was summoned. Its very height was towering in the clouds. Looking close, you see lightning, and Thundercloud's base sit at 2 kilometers high, meaning the war god is that big. Natsu looks puny when he's on its sword, Also, the moment it's summoned shows the summoning happening above mountains. Its very strength can easily split multiple mountains. Though, despite its immense size and strength, Natsu could easily one-shot it with his Fire Dragon King fist. Gray scales to this, as well as above the war god's mountain-splitting strength. Now I'm going to go back to the meteor feat and this time determine its power. Eyeballing, the meteor appears to be around 30 meters in diameter. I saw a video about meteor sizes that helped me determine this. Like I said before, all research will be linked in the description. Now looking around, I found that the mass of a stone meteor this size would be around 120,000 tons or 100,862,169 kilograms. Then for an iron meteor would be 300,000 tons or 272,155,422 kilograms. The reason I use iron 2 is because Elaine, using basic enchant, can strengthen things beyond their normalcy. She was using master enchant on the meteor. So, now that I got my mass and speed, I can then plug them into a kinetic energy calculator, resulting in yields of tier 6B country to large country level for both our masses. This is about right, and it may be higher, especially so considering the effect the meteor had upon entry, which Death Battle ignored. So Urza, with most of her bones broken, is country to large country level, meaning at full health she is far above large country level, which will scale Gray much higher since he's close to her ballpark. Now alright, I can already hear people saying, LOL, that meteor is only building size. Imagine hyping something that small to large country. Only fairy tale fans. Anyone who says this clearly knows nothing about meteors and fast-moving objects in general. The size of the meteor or object doesn't honestly matter. What matters is the speed of the object and the energy it's building up, as well as its capabilities of withstanding the speeds it's traveling at. Research proves I'm right, as something as small as a golf ball or a needle going at close to the speed of light can have effects comparable to a nuclear explosion. Imagine what something the size of a building would do going at those speeds. If you watch part 1 of my debunk and watch the video about a light speed meteor, then you'd know life on the planet would be toast. So no, the meteor being building size does not matter. Now, getting back to Urza, the series gives us a good idea on where Urza's at full health. Now, I can already hear it. Urza, above large country? Yeah, right. And nothing suggests she's above that level. It's an outlier. Actually, there's plenty to support fairy tales above large country, making Urza's meteor feat consistent. For starters, there's the Spriggans, one of which, Brandish, who can casually affect islands with her power, has stated that all the Spriggans are equal to her in power, with Elaine and August being the strongest. Brandish holds the title of Nation Destroyer and is capable of taking out nations, continents with her power. Now, I know simply a title isn't enough, but luckily she does right by her title in the sequel when she made Gajiel the same size as the wood dragon god Alderon, which means she can make herself that large as well, which she has shown capable of doing. Now, the wood dragon god is massive, the biggest thing we've seen in Fairy Tail. Here's a city named Dracil, which is bigger than Crocus. The whole city, not even being in panel, yet is still quite large. There's even multiple mountains surrounding the city, so it's big if you couldn't tell. Now, the crazy part is, this big city with all the mountains surrounding it is just Alderon's right hand. Then it's shown that he has 4 other cities on his body that are the same size as Dracil. The War God and Plutogrim are ants to him, and their size is up to basic clouds that are at 3 kilometers, meaning Alderon is far above cloud level in size, which is confirmed to be true as it's stated he surpasses mountains and clouds. This would include the top real-life clouds, Noctilucent clouds, which sit at 76 to 85 kilometers. As you can see, this dragon is massive. His toenails dwarf mountains. He's pretty much bigger than Mount Everest, and Brandish could easily make herself this size, then proceed to dish out devastating attacks similar to how Gajiel did against Alderon. Oh, and Alderon's far bigger than the robot. I know it's obvious, but I just felt like saying it. I mean, Death Battle was talking about how Tatsumi faced the giant robot, but didn't bring up the much bigger things that Fairy Tail has encountered, like Plutogrim, the War God, and Alderon. Granted, Alderon was introduced after the Death Battle, just like Hakone, but with or without them won't change anything. Alright, so there's the first supporting point. Now on to the second. Remember how Brandish stated that all the Spriggans are equal to her? Well, Another Spriggan, Wall, confirms her statement. Recall how I said Hero researched nuclear fusion? Well, Wall was able to ignite the process known as magnetic confinement fusion and fire it off as an attack against Loxus. Yes, I know it says magic confinement fusion, but that's just a small switch. It's still the same thing. It's explained by the author at the end of volume 55 that magic confinement is the same concept as magnetic confinement. It's just instead of magnetics, it's magic holding the plasma. This is not a name fallacy either for all those who are going to say, Wall's confinement process is not the same, it's just the name. There is no validation in that claim, that's just denial. You can't just spout off it's not the same when there is a clear as day explanation by the author. You want the proof, yet when you get solid proof, you proceed to deny said proof you asked for. Like, what? All in all, Wall's process is the same as magnetic confinement. Now the thing is, for fusion to happen through magnetic confinement, the temperature requirement is an astounding 150 million degrees Celsius. Yeah, crazy. Now, we can find the power behind Wall's first attack by using the Boltzmann's law of thermal radiation. I've seen this equation used for characters with heat-based abilities, like Yamamoto's Bankai from Bleach. So when we get our numbers and plug them into the equation, we get an astounding tier 6A continent level. There is another version of this equation which still gives us a result of continent level. And then the crazy thing is, it doesn't stop there. That's just his first minor attack. Wall can go a step further and easily fire an Aetherion shot. It's been stated numerous times throughout the series that Aetherion is capable of destroying an entire country in one shot. Though some may not know that the countries in Fairy Tail are in fact much bigger than our real-world continents. During the Sun Village arc, the wizard Saint Ward stated that the distance between his home and the Sun Village, both of which are located in Furey, is 1,200 miles. The distance in real life would cover a good portion of the United States. Despite this great distance, they are still within the confines of Furey, making the country rather large, bigger than North America. There's irony in this because, despite Furey being very large, it's close to being the smallest country of Ishgar. One of the smallest countries is bigger than North America. That's funny. That means that their planet is far bigger than ours. So the Council and Wall's Aetherion hits with power that can take out lands bigger than our continents. Now, some are probably thinking about the blast if Wall fired it. Well, Aetherion can be focused on a singular target and fired like a laser, taking away the area of effect while still retaining its overall power. This was said and shown during the Tower of Heaven arc when the Council fired it at the tower. There are also those who are going to say, Wall's Aetherion is a weaker version than the actual Aetherion. But this is an invalid statement that has no backing. There is no weaker version or secondary version of Aetherion. That is just headcanon. There is only one Aetherion, unless the series says there is another version, which it doesn't. Hero doesn't have to constantly walk us through what Aetherion does when he stated it and made it clear multiple times throughout the series. Well, we didn't see Wall fire it, so that means it's weaker. Just because Wall didn't fire it doesn't mean it's not that powerful. I mean, did you miss the part where he was stopped from firing? If you stopped one of two nukes that was the exact same from going off, does that mean the one that didn't go off is weaker? Anyways, using the equation from before, we can figure out how powerful Wall's Aetherion is, just changing the surface area. When done, we get a result of tier high 6A multi-continental. That is insane. And this would honestly be consistent with the size of the Fairy Tail world's continents. So there you have it. Two Spriggans who can easily pull off multi-continental without any effort, which would in turn scale over to all the other Spriggans who are equally as powerful as Wall and Brandish. Though still, this may not be enough. Well, there is another person that supports Fairy Tail being easily multi-continental, that being Natsu Dragoneel. Yeah, I know. I could practically see the raised eyebrows. Just hear me out. The reason I say Natsu is easily multi-continental is because he scales to Wall's heat temperature that he achieves through magnetic confinement fusion. On what grounds? Well, for one, he's one of the best fire and heat users in Fairy Tail, even more so than Wall. Secondly, he countered two Spriggans, one of which is the leader, with just pure heat. The first one, as I mentioned before, was when he freed himself and the others from Envel's ice. This may not come off as impressive at first glance, but when you do your research, this feat is in fact insane. As I've shown, Invel is actually reaching temperatures far colder than absolute zero, yet in the span of 2 minutes or so, Natsu countered it. Natsu would have had to instantly start emitting insane levels of heat to counter that level of cold in the time frame he did it. He wouldn't be able to just be dishing out any average level of heat, or else it would end up taking him far longer. Plus there's the fact that he did it in base without any effort. Invel is even impressed by this and says Natsu's the only one who could possibly pull that off. So base Alvarez Natsu in just the span of 2 minutes or so can have his body heat reach levels that can counter temps colder than absolute zero. It may not even take him that long now since he's much stronger in 100 Year Quest. Oh, and for those who are always wondering when Natsu ever uses his body heat in a fight, there it is. Then the next point is his battle against Zeref. Zeref, especially with Fairy Heart, is above Wall and Invel in strength and power, yet Natsu pushing himself to the limit, burning his arm, acquiring his Savage Flame, countered Fairy Heart's power and beat Zeref. There you go, two people who are equal and above Wall, countered by Natsu's heat, which justifies his base scaling to Wall's temperature. So with that being said, this means base Natsu can casually bring his temperature to 150 million degrees Celsius. You can go for a lower yet still very high temperature of 100 million degrees Celsius, which is the central temperature of a nuclear explosion. So base Natsu on any day can effortlessly have his flames and body heat be as hot if not hotter than the sun and its core, which is 15 million degrees Celsius. Though 150 and 100 million isn't his limit, seeing as he can counter temperatures colder than absolute zero. Now, since I was able to get a temperature for Natsu, I used the same formula as before as I did for Wall to get his power, again only changing the surface area, which gives us a result for base Natsu's casual power being tier high 6A multi-continental. Urza scales to a casual Natsu, meaning at full health she's casually multi-continental, putting a consistency to her being able to take out a country to large country level meteor while being incapacitated. And back to the person who's the topic of this video, Gray would easily be at this level as well, seeing as he can take on and instant freeze the flames of a serious partial END Natsu. So as you can see, Gray has incredible feats and scaling that shows just how powerful he is. I mean, he can instant freeze flames hotter than the sun. Yet Death Battle didn't bother putting in any effort into researching Gray and just gave him some half-assed scaling, which resulted in him being heavily downplayed. Alright, so that pretty much takes care of the attack power section. Now, before we move on to the last section, I'm going to take care of some of the statements that I know are going to be brought up. Like,
wow, this guy just said Fairy Tail's multi-continental. What a fanboy. Fairy Tail's back at it again with their wank.
yes, I did say that. Just like with Lightspeed and FTL, jabbing and insulting isn't a counter and doesn't refute any of the evidence in support that I brought up. Slander is not a counter. Slander is for losers.
Fairy Tail isn't multi-continental. Never seen them destroy one. They're barely mountain.
For one, they have destroyed mountains. Plus, when it comes to Fairy Tail, it's more attack potency based rather than large-scale destruction. Just like with Goku and Dragon Ball Z. Despite how powerful we all know Goku is at this point, we have yet to see him in his entire running destroy a planet. Even the fight between Super Saiyan God Gogeta and Broly didn't even destroy the ice continent that they were on, or even the mountains. So does this mean Gogeta and Broly are below continent and mountain level? No. In most cases, the area of effect and size of the attack does not determine its power. It's the potency. Like, say if a bomb critically damages someone with planet level durability, but it only fully takes out a building. The bomb wouldn't be considered building level, it would be planet level for hurting the person who has planet level durability. There is also the way of characters can just simply control the area of effect of their attacks while retaining the destructive power, pretty much like a Therion. So this is pretty much attack potency, and it also applies to a Akame ga Kill. This is a concession that is pretty much widely accepted due to the fact that if it wasn't, that authors would have to have their characters go from continent to continent to planet every time a fight happens due to the fact that their characters are destroying them every time they fight. Then there's,
Duh, no way Natsu's temperature's that high. He doesn't incinerate people. He can't even burn clothes.
So those who say this seem to have forgotten or just don't know that Natsu has perfect control over the temperature and intensity of his flames. He can set an entire person on fire and only have them feel minor first-degree pain. But if the person is strong enough or he needs to be serious to protect other people, you can bet he'll amp up his power and heat to where he can fight equal with or one-shot the person. Also, people need to stop thinking that brutality equals strength. It doesn't. What I mean is, just because a series has intense and brutal characters with a gory setting doesn't make it strong or stronger. If you rate and determine how powerful a character is by the level of brutality the series has, then most shonen series would be pretty weak. Going off that logic would mean Akame ga Kill is far stronger than both One Piece and Dragon Ball Z, which do have their fair share of intense moments, but not to the level of Akame ga Kill. Majority of the time, you'll just get gashes, and heavy bleeding. Heck, even Blood Sea and Another, which aren't big shonen series, would be above One Piece and Dragon Ball with that logic. I mean, if you watch those two, you'd understand. And the list of series goes on. I've seen people say the fireball from Akame ga Kill is above Ace's flames simply because the fireball brutally burned a clown, leaving only the bones. This is not true at all. Ace's flames have shown far more powerful feats. The fact of the matter is, every series has a tone and genre it's set in, which is why you don't equate brutality to strength. Akame ga Kill is a seinen series which has the brutal, mature stuff, while One Piece, Fairy Tail, and Dragon Ball Z are mainly shonen. All in all, unless a verse has feats of power comparable to an opposing verse, they won't stand a chance, no matter how brutal their series is. So even if Natsu's flames were constantly that high, it wouldn't mean his flames are weak. It would mean everything is just that resilient till it's not. Then there's,
Duh, someone like Lucy could withstand Natsu's heat, so so-and-so could easily handle his flames because they're above Lucy.
yeah, no, it doesn't work like that. Just because Lucy can handle Natsu's casual heat doesn't mean Natsu's flames are weak. It just means Lucy's that strong and resistant to that level of heat. It's understandable because thanks to Natsu, Gray, and Loxus, majority of Fairy Tail characters get decent elemental resistance. Also, just because she can take Natsu's casual heat doesn't mean anyone from a different verse who you think is better and has more feats can handle Natsu's flames. You can't scale characters from different series to each other. Take Luffy, for example. He is a top tier in One Piece, having fought many high tiers and has more impressive feats and capabilities than Lucy. So does that mean that he and the other high tiers of One Piece can withstand everything Lucy can? No. It doesn't matter if Luffy and the other high tiers in One Piece have cooler feats. Unless they've shown handling something comparable to attacks that Lucy can handle, then those said attacks will take them down indefinitely.
Wait, is this guy seriously implying Lucy can easily tank attacks from an all-out Luffy?
No. I am most definitely not implying something like that. Although, Lucy has been stated to be capable of fighting against Natsu if he doesn't go all out, and given how I just explained how powerful even a casual base Natsu is, so, aw man, people are not gonna like this.
They can't be that powerful because this would happen if they did that.
I know lots of people love to bring up the repercussions of feats, but you seem to forget that these are fantastic, whimsical, fictional worlds. When a character starts blowing up mountains and other things, you should probably start becoming a little bit more open-minded on what characters can and can't do, as I've said before. Not saying to stop trying to make sense of some stuff, just don't get too bent out of shape about it. Authors don't take into account repercussions of powers and abilities because, well, where would the fun be in that? This is another wide concession that applies, like with attack potency, to all action, manga, comics, and video games. Oh, and there's one more. It's
Natsu can't scale the wall because he doesn't use magnetic confinement to generate heat.
Well, no duh, Natsu doesn't use magnetic confinement to generate heat. He doesn't need to. Why? Because he's the fire dragon user, a full-fledged fire and heat user unlike Wall. He doesn't need to rely on any technical methods to generate heat because he can generate heat on his own. He is the method for which the heat is brought forth. I mean, seriously, to say Natsu doesn't scale because he doesn't use the same technical methods is pretty much saying Natsu isn't even stove-level heat because he doesn't generate heat the same way as a stove. You see how ridiculous that sounds? It doesn't matter how the heat is generated. As long as the scaling and reasoning makes sense, it can apply to Natsu, which it does. Also, for those who are going to say,
Base Natsu being 150 million degrees, LOL.
and cap, you have no validation with your mocking. You're only insulting because you don't like the idea of Natsu being that strong and have no counter to hard evidence, so you try to undermine the hard evidence with mocking and slander. Well, I'm sorry to say this, but that's not how it works. Insults and baseless denial don't make you look better in comparison. It makes you look worse, and it doesn't help your case. It will always be proof over denial. If you claim cap, you need to give the reason why and show why it's cap, not just claim it is. I backed up my claim of Natsu being 150 million degrees in base, and whether you like it or not, he's that level and the supporting evidence is there. Now we've reached the climax with the last part, which is durability. So Death Battle said that since Esdeath is a cunning general, she wouldn't fall for Grey's ability to eat ice twice, pretty much implying that she would stop using it so Grey wouldn't be able to eat it. Now Esdeath is definitely a comparable and skilled fighter without using her ice, but here's the thing, her ice is her main form of defense. It has been consistently shown anytime she is at risk of taking a hit, she will use her ice to defend herself, meaning she's more confident in the durability of her ice rather than her own. Bringing back up the fight with Mine, when her ice couldn't handle Mine's firepower, she saw herself at a major risk of being seriously injured. So if she stopped using her ice, she would be putting herself at a major disadvantage. Imagine if she didn't put up her ice armor before Tatsumi hit her, the damage would have been way worse. This shows that her own durability is not as good because she was knocked out and incapacitated by a freshly new evolved Tatsumi who isn't as strong as his in-game self. It was confirmed by Tatsumi that he did in fact knock Esdeath out, long enough for them to fight Budo and escape. We don't see her again until everything is over and Night Raid is gone, so her durability is capped at stage 2 Tatsumi.
Well, the hit Esdeath took was strong enough to knock back the robot,
is what some are going to say. As I said before, the hit Esdeath took was from a newly evolved Tatsumi who isn't as powerful as his in-game stage 2, due to in-game stage 2 having become stronger due to adapting like Esdeath said in their second fight, meaning that the hit Tatsumi landed on the robot is in fact stronger than the hit that he landed on Esdeath prior. This punch may in fact inflict more damage on her than it did before. Well, one way or another, she caps at stage 2 Tatsumi because he knocked her out, and even hurt her. Side note, this further shows that Esdeath isn't on par with the robot because the robot is easily capable of withstanding multiple hits from a stronger stage 2 and a stage 3 Tatsumi. Now, I've seen people try to hype stage 2 Tatsumi punching back the robot by ridiculously inflating its size, saying,
well, the robot is bigger than the capital walls, which are taller than mountains, so the robot's size would be 12 to 40 kilometers.
Also,
the robot's hands can cover a city.
Alright, for starters, the walls are not bigger than mountains. This is a misconception that stems from a panel towards the beginning of the series that shows the walls being somewhat the same size as mountains. Here's the thing, just like with Pluto Grimm and the building, distance makes things look smaller or relative to each other from a far off perspective. You can't judge size from far distances. It's only when you're up close can you get a true gauge of something's size. The walls are in fact nowhere close to the same size as mountains. This is proven at the end of the manga when we get an up-close aerial shot of the capital and the walls are seen being nowhere close to, nor anywhere close to the same size as the mountains. Then the robot being 12 to 40 kilometers is just ridiculous. Do people who claim this grasp just how big 40 kilometers is? That's bigger than Mount Everest, which is 8.848 kilometers. Anyone with eyes can clearly see that in by no means whatsoever is the robot as big, let alone bigger than Mount Everest, and the manga clearly shows it's not. With it for one not actually being bigger than a mountain, and the fact that the buildings near it are clearly visible, when they shouldn't be if it was actually that big. The robot isn't even cloud level, which I've stated before at average is 2 kilometers high, and those aren't clouds surrounding it, it's smoke. Even though I shouldn't have to debunk this claim at this point, the robot's hands are in by no means big enough to cover a city. People think this thing is like the wood dragon god, who as I've shown before, literally has giant cities, 5 of them, and mountains on his hands and body. The robot is nowhere close to that. As you can see, its feet only cover and destroy a couple buildings. Its hands are obviously smaller than its feet, So how somebody can come to think that it can cover an entire city despite the panels showing otherwise is beyond me. To drive this home, when the robot crushed Tatsumi, he is visible in the crater. So no, the walls in the robot are not bigger than mountains or Mount Everest. If I was to give a good estimate on its size from the panels that have been shown, the robot is between 600 to 800 meters, no more, no less. To put that into perspective, that would put the robot between two of the tallest buildings in the world, the Shanghai Tower, which is 632 meters, and the Khalifa, which is 858 meters. Looking at these two buildings and the panels, this is definitely the robot's size range. Alright, back to Esdeath. So since her ice is her main form of durability, I decided to scale around that. Oh, and I will also be getting more into her attack power since I didn't really get into it before, and she scales to the people who can shatter her ice. Now, what I think is a good supporting case which Death Rattle didn't bring up is the trump card of Jaeger member Bowls, which creates a large explosion. It's somewhat easy to get an estimate of the size of the explosion without pixel measuring. Here we have Mine at her sniper position on top of a tall cliff which is a good distance away from the battlefield. Kurumi as well as Tatsumi moved to her position, and as you can see, the explosion reached all the way to where they were, and its height is slightly taller than the cliff. So the explosion isn't much height-wise, but it does have a good span and power. Between Mine's position and the battlefield, there's multiple tall plateaus that the explosion destroyed, and the other plateaus on the adjacent side of the battlefield, leaving only a crater behind. So if I was to give this a good guess, this would be around the megatons or city level. This applies to Esdeath due to the fact that Leone was able to block a part of the explosion using a shield. Esdeath's ice most definitely will scale above that shield. Then we have Stage 2 Tatsumi being capable of easily breaking her ice, which would put his strength and attack power above that of the explosion, which would put him at city level plus. This would scale back to Esdeath because she's on par with Stage 2 Tatsumi. Then, she and her ice are also easily capable of withstanding the heat of the fireball weapon that I mentioned earlier, which is shown capable of instantly burning away the skin and muscle of a nasty clown. If you've read the manga, you'll know why I said that. Looking around, I found that to instantly incinerate a person, the temperature would have to be 1200 to 3000 degrees Celsius at least. There are even videos that cover this topic. So the flame orb's temperature would be around 2000 degrees Fahrenheit or 1093 degrees Celsius since the bones were left. This means Esdeath and her ice can easily withstand heat that would instantly incinerate a normal person. Now, with her snowstorm activated, Esdeath's ice can withstand a roar from Dragon Tatsumi. Now, since he took down the robot whose durability in its first form is mountain level due to withstanding multiple hits from Stage 2 Tatsumi, and with its durability increasing in its second form, taking it up to mountain level plus, this would mean Dragon Tatsumi's power would be mountain level plus, making an amped Esdeath's ice that durable. Later on, while the snowstorm is still active, Esdeath could fight Akame in her trump card form, Little Warhorn, the form making Akame strong enough to easily break through the ice shield that could fend off Dragon Tatsumi's roar. So Little Warhorn Akame's strength and power would be at least a gigaton, which is tier high 7A, large mountain level, and would scale back to Esdeath and the durability of her ice while the snowstorm is activated. Now, when it comes to durability for Gray, it's much easier to find out. In Fairy Tail, it has been consistently shown that a character's durability is equal if not higher than their own attack power and potency, meaning they can withstand what they dish out. During Edelus, Natsu, Gaju, and Wendy, combining their roars, created an explosion the size of mountains. They were shown completely fine afterwards despite being caught within the explosion. Also during Edelus, in her fight against Nightwalker, Urza withstood an explosion of their colliding powers that blew up a floating island-like structure they were fighting on. Even Lucy in her battle against Brandish could withstand having her magic compressed and thrown back at her. Then Gray, in his battle against Silver, could withstand his attacks which were much stronger than his own. And now that I think about it, him withstanding Silver's attacks actually further shows his immunity to the cold, because as I've stated before, an elemental slayer's temperature is applied to their attacks. This means even before he got Devil Slayer, Gray could withstand temperatures far below absolute zero. This puts a consistency to how base Gray could withstand Invel's casual instant freeze. So Gray, unlike Esdeath, can handle attacks that his own ice wouldn't be able to handle. Another instance is during the Grand Magic Games when Rufus used flames to take out Gray's ice, but Gray just ran right through the flames, commented he's felt hotter, obviously from Natsu. Well, that marks the end of durability, making my analysis complete. With all the info compiled from both parts, I can give the results on where they're actually at. Though, before giving the results, I want to give my thoughts on what if this was an all equalized fight. If that was the case, I think Esdeath would have a good advantage. In this scenario, Esdeath not using her ice would be good because Gray wouldn't be able to eat it and power himself up. Yeah, Gray can still use his ice to fight, unlike Esdeath, but with her strength being relatively equal to him in this scenario, she'd be able to shatter it without much problem, which would make the fight primarily a close quarters combat fight, which Esdeath would have the edge. Now what really gives Esdeath a higher chance is her quick first aid with her ice, being able to replace severed limbs with ice versions. Even with an ice limb, Esdeath hasn't shown signs of being weakened, so if Gray took a limb from her, it wouldn't matter. For Gray, on the other hand, it would be a major problem if Esdeath did this to him. He wouldn't be able to use Ice Make, and his combat prowess would be dwindled significantly. So in an equalized fight, I think Esdeath would have the edge at a victory. In an unequalized fight, though, both of them being at their true levels of power, this is where they will actually be at. Base Esdeath's stats would actually in fact be around City Plus level. Then with the Snowstorm activated, her power would increase to Large Mountain level. So when you actually delve more into it, Esdeath in truth is not at the absurd level of power Death Battle put her at, but she's still strong nonetheless though. Now for base Gray, these would be his true stats. Yeah, Gray is way stronger than what Death Battle portrayed him to be, easily multi-continental plus. This is just base Gray though without going all out. His base would be much stronger if he did go all out, then activating Devil Slayer. Yeah, I think you can surmise just how insanely strong Gray is at this point. Like honestly, I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Gray in just base would solo the Akame ga Kill universe with no difficulty. Yeah, I said it. It's just no one in the Akameverse comes close to base Gray in power and stats. His speed is beyond theirs to where he could just speed blitz any of them, in the same way he did the Thunder Legion in the 100-Year Quest. Also, none of them would be able to evade his ice attacks. Now, how about we equalize just speed, taking away speed blitzing? Yeah, even with speed equal, Gray could still beat any of them. His durability is far above any of their attack power. Gray would be able to withstand any of their attacks without even a scratch. This is for those who are going to say,
But Akame's sword.
just like with Esdeath and her time freeze ability, Akame needs to be strong enough to damage the person she's fighting in order to do anything. Unfortunately for her, she isn't. Base Akame, without her trump card or even a drug enhancement, isn't even strong enough to break or even crack Esdeath's ice, which is city level plus in durability, which means base Akame is way below city level in strength. She's more than likely in the kilotons, which is tier high 7A or low 7B, large town level to small city level. This level of strength wouldn't so much as even tickle Gray. Even with her trump card, her power would only increase to tier high 7A, large mountain level, which still isn't enough to phase Gray. So Akame and her sword aren't doing anything.
Well, what about mine? If Gray's as powerful and dangerous as you say he is, wouldn't mine just get stronger and match him?
For those who think this, that's what's called a no limits fallacy, and she's not the Hulk. It's been shown on panel that Mine and Pumpkin have a clear limit to the amount of power she can dish out. Going to her complete max would break her gun and cause her to fall into a comatose state. Her max firepower is only in the megatons, tier 7B, city plus level, due to breaking base Esdeath's ice, and that isn't even going to do anything to Gray. His strength and attack power is way too much for any of their durability to handle. A single punch from Gray and it would be a repeat of what happened when Budo punched Leone and Tatsumi punched Esdeath and Budo, except this time they won't be getting back up at all. It would be lights out for them instantly. Esdeath's ice won't do any good in protecting her, seeing as it would instantly break the moment he hits it, because it's not durable enough to handle his blows either. Also, given Gray's strength, none of them can block his blows because they'll just end up being sent flying. In truth, instantly KO'd, but that's beside the point. It would just be like how Wave was sent flying when he tried to block Susanoo's attack, while Gray on the other hand could easily stop any of their blows with just one hand, like Natsu did with Sting or like he did with Natsu in Dragon Cry. Gray also has the option of simply trapping them in ice. He doesn't have to make contact with them to do it, so they won't see it coming. This takes care of any of the biological Tegus like Susanoo or Kuro, who will regenerate if their cores aren't destroyed. They won't be breaking out because their strength isn't even close to being capable of breaking ice as durable as Gray's.
Well, what about Tatsumi and Incresio? He could just adapt to Gray.
Again, that's a no limits fallacy. He can't adapt to anything and everything. He isn't Doomsday or Darwin from Marvel. It has been shown that before evolving, Tatsumi has been beaten and injured really bad. Before he even has the chance to adapt, Gray would have long since beaten him. Also, though Gray wouldn't need Devil Slayer, he could just deep flash freeze Dragon Tatsumi and the others. This would be instant GG because he nor anyone has the resistance to go against Gray's insane level of cold. Tatsumi wouldn't be adapting or breaking free because it's not a layer of ice. He would be frozen inside and out. He'd literally be turned into ice, a dragon ice sculpture. Tatsumi has no counter or experience against to what is essentially ice transmutation. Now, those were all 1v1 matches. Let's say it was a 1 versus all match, Gray versus everybody at the same time, and everybody on the Akame ga Kill side is at their best, meaning their peak of power and any transformations. The result would still be the same. Gray would beat all of them. Everything I've stated before about their power would remain unchanged. Even if they team up against him, the fact of the matter is they still won't be able to scratch him or withstand his attacks. Not only that, but Gray could easily one-shot all of them instantly at the same time due to the fact that his range is huge, and unlike Esdeath, his range is offensive based. With just a single hand wave from Gray, everybody in the surrounding area would instantly be ice, just like with the Geo and the giants in the Sun Village, which applies to Gray since he scales above Silver at this point. Then, unequalizing speed, they would all get speed blitzed. This is another showing of how Death Battle completely ignores and leaves things out for the sake of entertainment. Gray's range is superior to Esdeath. She has no offensive ranged abilities, even with the snowstorm activated. Gray could just froze the whole area along with Esdeath, and there would have been no way she could have avoided it or seen it coming. Then there's the last fact that he is literally immune to all of her attacks thanks to Devil Slayer. Death Battle always says they go for the one who has the most chances of taking a win, and Gray in fact holds all the cards and advantages in the fight. I mean, Fairy Tail overall is just a much more powerful verse than Akame ga Kill, which is not as powerful as Death Battle or battle forums like Versus Battle Wiki make them out to be. I can make a quick case for Lucy putting up a fight. Lucy may not have ice element immunity like Gray, but she does have good cold resistance. As I said before, majority of Fairy Tail characters get elemental resistance thanks to Natsu, Gray, and Loxus. Also, just like how she scales to Natsu if he doesn't go all out, she scales to Gray if he doesn't go all out. Lucy's cold resistance has been shown. When Envel first appeared, he instantly froze Natsu's roar. He wasn't targeting just Natsu's roar, as the drop in temperature was noted by Lucy and the others. If you watched part 1 of the debunk, then you know that freezing small regular fire is impossible to do even with absolute zero. So in that moment, Lucy was exposed to temperatures far colder than absolute zero and didn't get instantly frozen, just got the shivers, which resulted in Envel having to drop the temperature even further in order to instant freeze her and the others. I think you can see where I'm heading. This means Esdeath's time freeze ability won't work on Lucy, since Lucy can withstand temperatures far colder than absolute zero. To make it clear, I have nothing against Akame ga Kill or Esdeath. I really like the series. It's just that they are heavily overestimated due to misinterpretations. Akame ga Kill is a strong verse in its own right, but when stacked up against true powerhouses like Fairy Tail, One Piece, and Naruto, they just can't compete. Yeah, I've seen claims saying Akame ga Kill is above the Naruto verse, meaning the God tiers 2 in stats. Yeah, crazy. So, in truth, Akame ga Kill is only sitting at large town up to city level plus in stats, and mountain to large mountain level when they're amped. Now, getting back on track, Gray, in fact, would be able to beat Esdeath and her verse in just base without any effort. People tend to underrate Gray because he's not all big, boom, flashy like the other top tiers like Natsu, Urza, and Loxus are, but as I've shown, Gray is in fact a very powerful person. Fairy Tail as a whole is in fact far more powerful than what people realize. So the true winner of this fight would be Gray Fullbuster. Man, after doing this debunk, I think Gray deserves a second match after being done so poorly in this one. I know Screw Attack hardly gives anime characters second matches and, well, admit when they're wrong, but I think it's high time that they start doing that. It'll show that they're willing to listen and own up to their mistakes and are willing to correct them. So, if they were to give Gray a second chance, I think it would be cool if he went up against a fire user. It'll be a nice change from the same elementals against each other. Also, if I'm not mistaken, Screw Attack hasn't done an ice versus fire match before, so this would be a really good addition. So if they did decide to give Gray a second shot and properly scaled him like I did in this debunk, I think a cool opponent for him would be the Human Torch. Like, just imagine it. Now, if they don't give Gray a second chance and do another Fairy Tail character, these are the ones who I think they'll more than likely go with. For their opponents, I think these guys would be a good choice, and the FT side has a more unlikely chance of beating them, since these four, especially Loxus and Gagio, scale to everything I brought up in my debunk videos. Going this route would be alright too, because Screw Attack can indirectly correct the poor scaling they did for Gray, or they can give Esdeath a second match and correct the inflated scaling and misinterpreted information that they put out for her. Though I see them doing another Fairy Tail character again, which in that case, let's make some noise and let Death Battle know about these matchups and to get it right next time. And with that officially marks the end of my debunk of Gray vs. Esdeath. Thanks for watching this two-parter, guys. It was something that I found myself really enjoying putting together, so much so that I may do more videos like this alongside my gaming videos and others that I have planned. Those instead will be focused on a singular character, like putting all the info from Gray from this video into one focused on just him. Like, not many people do Fairy Tail power scaling vids, so why not? Though I'll have to learn a bit more about calcing. Well, anyway, thanks again. Like, subscribe, share, and spread the word about the info you got from this debunk. This is Radiant, over and out.